Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined us today from around the globe, and welcome to the February edition of the Global Webinar Series on Communications. We will go ahead and get started. My name is Kate Midden. I am the Communications Director for the Road Safety Program at GHAI, and I'm really excited to share today's presentation with you. We are diving into messaging apps for digital advocacy. And in some ways, this topic is going to look very familiar because we're talking about platforms that we've all used for a long time, the WhatsApps of the world, Facebook Messenger, but their use cases really vary from platforms that have been used for advocacy in ways that are just starting to get a bit more structure to new and innovative ways that we may not have come in touch with before. I will introduce our global communications expert who will be walking us through the presentation in just a moment. But first, a couple of housekeeping items. I do want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. We will be sharing the recording of this event after it closes in the next few days by email. So if you haven't RSVP'd, if you shared through a direct link, please do go ahead and use that link to sign up so that we can send you the recording in case you would like to share it around. Secondly, we will be saving some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat box. Message us directly. You can share either with all panelists and attendees or just the panelists. We will have time for that. So please do share those. We're really looking forward to making this as useful for everyone who's joining as possible. And with that, I would like to introduce Luke Talander, who I think many people on this call have had the pleasure of working with before. Luke is a digital campaign strategist that has a deep background in digital and has been advising coalitions on digital trends and digital strategy and how to use all of these platforms for quite a long time. So Luke, over to you if you would like to walk us through the agenda and take it away.
Great. It is very exciting to be with you all this morning or afternoon or evening, as Kate said. So this is, a topic that, we've kind of been talking about with some of you for some time. I know that, many coalitions, many people use these platforms in their everyday life, especially with organizing with colleagues and partners. And so in many ways, you might be, very familiar with the platforms, but this morning, I'm just going, I'll go through the agenda. I'm just going to give kind of a brief overview of the messaging platforms, kind of some of the pros and cons in terms of advocacy, some of the reasons that we might be attracted to some of these platforms can make it difficult for advocacy campaigns and particularly for tracking impact and many of the ways that we use other digital platforms are not possible through messenger apps, but many of the use cases are singular and unique pros to why we would use these platforms. So I'm going to go a little bit into some use cases for how I have seen this been done well, and other opportunities for growth, I think, for different coalitions, and then a little bit of just kind of the basics of where these are being used. I mean, the reality is that there are new platforms every day, and you know, it can vary a lot from country to country. So just a kind of a brief overview of the landscape, and then kind of how they work, and then a little bit into you know, if we're approaching this, what are the questions to ask before, you know, thinking about investing time and resources into adding structure, and using these platforms in new ways. So if some of you have been to, you know, previous webinar series, and, you know, and just, you know, working with our team in general, we've been talking about how the digital landscape is evolving and changing, particularly over the last year and a half. I would say it's, you know, paid advertising has become more difficult and restricted on legacy social media, particularly around advocacy, and kind of what they're calling social issue ads, which is kind of a catch-all for political content. And, you know, while we're seeing that, we're also, you know, seeing that, you know, conversations to be, you know, important, are becoming more and more targeted to specific audiences. And so, you know, no longer is it helpful or effective to try to, you know, talk to kind of the blanket, you know, general audience, you know, the wide public. We're getting more and more targeted in our digital platform usage, and you know, conversations are reflecting that. And you know, as that you know, as this is happening, individuals and organizations are also looking to enhance, you know, security and privacy in their conversations. And so, you know, particularly with kind of how social media has evolved, messaging apps are, you know, becoming more popular for a lot of different forms of communication, kind of given the security and privacy, you know, difficulties that many of the legacy platforms are finding around, you know, political content in particular. So, you know, we've seen that, you know, this is a growing industry, and, you know, these are just a couple of the platforms across some of the countries that you may be from. You know, in particular, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger are the biggest. WhatsApp being, you know, I think, you know, I don't have the figure, but, you know, a huge chunk of, you know, humanity at large uses WhatsApp in the day-to-day, and, you know, Facebook Messenger. Facebook is the largest social networking site in the world, but new competitors are popping up, particularly in, you know, specific countries. You know, Viber is specifically in Ukraine. Line is in, you know, Japan and Thailand. So, you know, different competitors, and, you know, and we've seen, you know, as you know, political realities change in different countries, new apps are becoming more popular or effective depending on kind of how people are using them, and the political reality on the ground in different countries. So just to give a little bit of data, this is just specifically on WhatsApp, which is the largest of these, and the most common for the countries that we are working in through the road safety program. So just WhatsApp, an insane amount of messages are coming through, but I think what's most important is that, because it's more targeted, when we're talking about paying for, paying for social ads, we're only seeing, a tiny fraction of the audience that we're targeting, and even fewer are clicking through to take action or whatever we're asking them to do. But with WhatsApp engagement rates, it's tremendously higher. People are most people are opening WhatsApp messages within just a few moments of receiving them, and the majority of sharing online now takes place on private channels like messaging apps. So it's a huge kind of untapped opportunity for groups, but certainly there are difficulties measuring and being able to kind of harness this huge majority of conversations that are taking place online. So I think I started to touch on this as this becomes more attractive to groups. People are looking to messaging apps to really kind of meet people where they are, to make it as seamless as possible, to kind of tap into existing conversations and organic groups. The more that the infrastructure is already there, we can tap into conversations that are already happening. There is a lot of interest on building kind of an owned channel and audience, whether through paid or kind of organic relationships. I think that's very attractive. It's easier to connect users with resources than it would be via email or social ad, and drive them to take action. So because of all of this, I think it's rising in kind of use case for advocacy groups around the globe. So I tried to put together what I thought were the most important use cases for messenger apps. And so I'll just go through them one by one, and then I have some examples for you. So, I think the most common use case is, trying to tap into this peer-to-peer sharing, empowering users to, share your content with their networks. So if you have, people who have their own organic networks of maybe, parents, friends or colleagues or family or whatnot, there already are, these networks. So figuring out how to tap into them to share content, using messenger apps to answer questions and engage with your audience directly, I think is very, very popular, and there's a lot of ways to kind of build your accounts to be able to do this seamlessly. I think, you know, with WhatsApp in particular being a social network, there is the opportunity for people to kind of use their status update, which is kind of like an Instagram story, to showcase you know, different actions. So we've done you know, pledges, petitions, kind of soft actions that people can highlight in their status updates. I think, you know, a highly engaged group is important. You know, you can drive your groups to, you know, to take action or, you know, lead online and offline events. You know, certainly the most prevalent use case is, you know, using apps to organize coalition-wide coordination and resource sharing. So I know, you know, many of your coalitions may already be using these for this kind of use case, but you know, there are you know, endless ways that you can kind of create groups that can help communication and coordination. And then, you know, one of our priorities for 2021 is, you know, supporting influencer management. And so we've really seen it be effective to use WhatsApp to build community and relationships with influencers and activate them to take different actions. So here are a couple of examples. So, you know, this is just an example from one of the coalitions that I work with. You know, we have a media WhatsApp group where, you know, we can talk about things in, you know, from our day-to-day lives. And I think, you know, there are lots of different ways to build groups that, you know, aren't, you know, cover different, you know, slices of communities. And so lots of ways to use it to, you know, to support the work. This is just an example of a status update that we made a part of a youth influencer tobacco control action. So there's, you know, lots of ways that you can ask them to use, you know, hashtags and visuals in their status updates to reach audience. Obviously, it's, you know, it's a closed owned channel, so it's hard to kind of track this, but through the influencer program that we've done, we've asked people to take these updates and then kind of report on how it looks. So this is just an example of that. And then I think influencer management, some of you may have been in the last global webinar series webinar where we heard from a partner in Tanzania on how they developed an influencer network. I believe, you know, a WhatsApp group is something that he has used to organize that community. And, you know, we think that apps can be, you know, really helpful to building that community. And so, you know, as we continue to work with lots of you through the Champions program, we'll think about how we can integrate kind of our web-based model with WhatsApp to make sure that people are connected to resources and community in the most seamless fashion possible. So I will say that there are some considerable downsides to the platform when we're talking about kind of use cases. I think from my perspective, one of the biggest difficulties is having difficulty measuring success and identifying trends given kind of the closed nature of this and the limited data, and so it can definitely be difficult in that regard. I think lack of control of the message. We've seen in many of your countries that WhatsApp has been used to spread misinformation, and so we have to be careful, and there's just a lot of lack of control about how things can spread quickly, which is both a pro and a con, and so we just have less control over the message as it continues to resonate throughout kind of the WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger world. So high barrier to entry. For WhatsApp in particular, users need to add your number to their phone, so that can be difficult. And the rules are constantly changing on kind of the own nature of the relationship. We've seen with Facebook Messenger in particular, they're trying to monetize access to Messenger groups, and so I think it's while WhatsApp is fairly basic and prevalent everywhere, I think that we will see that Facebook obviously owns WhatsApp, and I think they will evolve together, and the rules today might not be the rules tomorrow. So this is just a quick look at the top Messenger apps per country. You can see the biggest group of them is WhatsApp. The majority of our countries use WhatsApp. Facebook Messenger is prevalent in a number of countries, and then there's more regional apps. Certainly China has its own ecosystem. Some of kind of a lot of specific regions or specific countries have different messenger apps that are more or less prevalent there. So we've seen WhatsApp kind of being the biggest app, but several of our Asian countries really use Facebook Messenger more than WhatsApp, and then now we're moving into Ukraine. They have their own version. Obviously, China is its own ecosystem as well, and so a lot of variety, but really kind of focused on the first two. So I'm not going into super broad detail around the app functionality. If we go deeper with some of you into what this would look like, certainly there's a lot more information on, you know, the functionality of how these apps work, but I'm just going to talk very briefly about kind of top line how it works, and then we can kind of discuss use cases and what this looks like. But the basic functionality for WhatsApp, many of you are probably already pretty familiar. There's kind of two types of lists. One, broadcast list is more about kind of direct mobilization, and then group lists are more around coordination and organization. I think there are some different ways to build lists, but for some group lists, there is a limit around about 250, and for you to add people to your list, they need to have your WhatsApp number stored on a mobile device. So there can be onboarding limitations. And then, WhatsApp is somewhat integrated with Facebook, and they have their own business account functionality. Much of that is more around customer relationship functionality, but it could be something that is useful for some users. But I think the main functionality is that a broadcast list is kind of one way, versus a group list is more around coordination and mobilization. This is just an example of a broadcast list, for kind of more one-way information sharing around a broadcast list, sending alerts, and people can add the number to the contact, and then they can send a message to WhatsApp and join the group. Facebook Messenger, a little bit different, but mostly the same. It is connected to the, obviously Facebook, the largest social media network in the world. WhatsApp, is also integrated with Facebook somewhat, but it's, not quite as seamless as Messenger, which is, fully integrated with the, the UI and just the functionality. And there's, ways to leverage paid infrastructure seamlessly, as well as connecting with people directly who comment on your Facebook page, which can be a way to kind of build your list. So some kind of specifics around the use, but mostly it kind of plays a similar role. We've seen, people use different ways to kind of recruit new people for lists. This is a little bit older, before some of the paid infrastructure was put together, but there are ways to to connect with people who engage with events like Facebook Live or comments or asking questions to try to build relationships with your audience. So I think there is the question about the integration with paid strategy. I think it can be appealing to try to think about how to use paid advertising to build a WhatsApp group, which could be helpful, but really, like, conversion ads can be very expensive, and I think it really depends on targeting and local ad costs. So I think really understanding the real cost and value of this is important, and then thinking about how to if you use Facebook and WhatsApp, ways to integrate with your Facebook ads. There are a number of ways, as Facebook owns WhatsApp, to link to the WhatsApp account from the Facebook page and use advertising to drive WhatsApp action as the engagement. So some opportunity there, but can be a little bit complicated, and I think really needs to be explored as to understanding if the value of the paid strategy is effective in your local context. So I tried to put down kind of steps if you're thinking about identifying if messaging apps are right for you, kind of really thinking about what are the steps of assessing feasibility and the value of the channel in your campaign. So I think first things first, I think identifying feasibility and precedent for messaging app use for advocacy in your country. Certainly that's something that we can provide insight on at GHAI. But I think really thinking about, is there a precedent for this, and is it effective? Really looking at the use cases and developing a strategic rationale for how these apps could fill a gap in your advocacy campaign needs. It could be that they don't, and we always as supporting groups to build out their digital infrastructure, never recommend branching out into new platforms if there isn't a strong strategic rationale for the use case, as well as availability of the resources needed in order to be successful, whether that be staff time, paid cost, hard costs, or the resources needed to kind of build a list. So if there is kind of precedent in your country and a strong strategic rationale and the resources needed available, then I think you have to think about do you have the ability to commit to a long-term strategy for sustainability and growth, rather than just thinking about it as a one-off thing. So that that's the steps that I would think through if if I was deciding how to approach really any channel or tool for a campaign. And so just kind of wanted to break that out for you, and certainly here to think about it. And some of this might be more organic in some of your campaigns, but I think it's key to really think about whether or not messaging apps are right for your campaign, and if so, kind of in what regard, and maybe it's just a coordination and organization tool, or maybe there's opportunity to build it into something more for your campaign. So that's all I have for today. I saw some notes being, I don't know if there were any questions coming in.
Thank you so much, Luke. That was a really excellent presentation. And The messaging platforms are so interesting because so much of their power comes from the authenticity and trust that people build in closed networks. You have closed networks with people who you're familiar with, or who share very specific similar interests. So there's so much power in cultivating them, but also I'm happy you also walked through the downsides, that there are considerations that need to be taken into account, that it is very possible to lose control of the message, that can be susceptible to misinformation. Privacy is not something that we have gotten into so much on this call, but there are also considerations there. But that should not eclipse sort of the opportunity on the horizon for these platforms. I know I have a couple of follow-up questions for you. I would really urge everyone in the audience who has a burning question or even a clarifying question to go ahead and drop them in the chat box or send a message directly to the panelists, and I can go ahead and share that with Luke. But before then, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce Rinki Sharma, who is the lead for communications and campaigns with Consumer Voice. Rinki has a lot of experience in this area, and Rinki would love to hear your experience using these platforms for advocacy.
Hi, good evening from New Delhi, India. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, loud and clear.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kate, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you so much, Luke, for such a wonderful presentation. We learned a lot from this presentation, specifically regarding app, because now everybody is using applications in this virtual mode. I would like to share the experience that we are using WhatsApp in various projects, including road safety. So we keep exchanging latest trends, what is going on social media related to our projects, the media highlights, suggestions, how the important meetings are taking place by the decision makers, what are the laws existing, proposed, amendment. So a lot of sharing we are doing the WhatsApp group, and also sometimes we need support from the partners for our social media postings. So when we are tweeting to our decision maker, we are requiring support to get the issue highlighted on the social media, or we want the engagement from partners to make the hashtag trending. So that lot is happening on the WhatsApp by exchanging the information, because it is bringing everybody on the same platform, and in the virtual mode there are no boundaries. So yes, WhatsApp is very helpful. And I also have a question to Luke. Can I ask right now or later on?
Please go right ahead.
Yeah, so Luke, you spoke about the WhatsApp, but we all know that there are certain restrictions WhatsApp has posed, and people are shifting to Telegram. So how do you see that shift from the point of view of using the application? Because I don't know whether many of us are very familiar. In fact, I have not shifted so far from WhatsApp to Telegram, but do you think the possibility of using it in the future communication? Do you have any idea about it, so that we can think about using the Telegram, considering the confidentiality of the information and usage? Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the landscape is always evolving. I think that there are a lot of inherent benefits to a network that's as big as WhatsApp. I do understand that Signal is growing or Telegram is growing in power. A lot of places, I know in India there's a lot of political sensitivities around how apps as well as other social media is used to organize people for taking actions. So I think we'll kind of have to wait and see, if it's a broader trend. I think that with WhatsApp's integration with Facebook and the wide use case, I think that it will, for broader mobilization, will probably play the biggest role. But certainly for, maybe for interpersonal communications or sensitive communications, it might be, best practice might kind of evolve. So I think we're in, both in India and in lots of places, we're in kind of a transitory period where things are evolving. So, definitely will also kind of that, we're also looking to you kind of as norms evolve in your country and how people are using different different apps. I think we can kind of adjust as needed, I think, over time.
Thank you so much, Rinki. I think that's the way that the India Coalition is using this is very salient, because there is so much power in using WhatsApp to mobilize the network, particularly in regards to social media and making sure that there is a groundswell there and using it as a coordination tool. We did have another question. This one is from Shefali Tandon, who is the Director of Communications at Save Life Foundation, who wants to know more about influencer management on the platform. We touched on it that these platforms can be used for managing influencers, but Luke, if you could just go a little bit deeper about what that looks like, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it, with highly kind of engaged networks like the one that I was talking about in Tanzania. It's a way to share resources and get people to kind of react right away. So we're still kind of developing our structure around influencer management, and are thinking through and working with many countries around kind of using a web-based platform strategy to organize. But I think it'll be integrated with WhatsApp, just because in so many countries the quickest and most reliable way to get a hold of somebody and drive them to a website is just by WhatsApp, and it's not by email, especially emails that can get caught in spam filters and whatnot. So I think it's kind of organic, but we're not building all of our infrastructure just around WhatsApp, but I think that there is a lot of use. One of our big goals with influencer management, and part of why we built kind of a web-based platform, was to allow for community building and relationship building within the influencer networks. And I think that WhatsApp can only, or any messaging app can only increase that ability for groups to kind of coordinate and build relationships. I do think there is some barriers to entry, and it kind of depends on what kind of influencers you're managing and how they relate to each other and how they relate to you. If it's I think it's more kind of the micro influencer strategy that we've been talking about. You might not want to kind of build that relationship with somebody super high powered or somebody in the government. There might be sensitivities, and depending on how big your group is, you have to think about how you want to split it up and organize. But I think it's useful. If there are other specific questions about influencer use case, I'm happy to address as well.
Yeah, I think the distinction that you're drawing, Luke, is right. I think when you look at these platforms, we talk about influencers in terms of micro influencers, which are people who have a very certain kind of influence on constituencies that you are trying to advocate to. So it might be someone that doesn't have an enormous following or isn't, you know, a worldwide celebrity, but has a lot of value in terms of the message that they can carry to their networks. And if you're talking about that in terms of road safety, for example, you might be looking at a victims network. You know, there are a lot of different people who can be micro influencers, but those are people who it might be easier to capture them in a WhatsApp group and spur engagement there, people rallying around a specific cause who are a bit more accessible. And when you're talking about influencers in terms of, you know, the really high profile celebrities, the you know, the Priyanka Chopras of the world, you know, who might not be as accessible to might not be as accessible as sending a WhatsApp message or getting a number of celebrities in a WhatsApp group. There are different strategies to be applied there, and I think that those are evolving. There's also, are you bringing them into a closed network, or are you trying to broadcast through them, for example, by a status update from an organization that that they may follow? So I think there are a few different ways to use the platforms, and that's definitely an area that is evolving. Luke, you had touched on, you had mentioned youth earlier, and I think youth is a big, youth is a, you know, of course, is not a big homogenous group, but it is a group that a lot of organizations are looking to reach younger people on these platforms. Can you talk a bit about what are different touch points with younger people in these platforms? We talked about the status updates as being a place that you see, you know, more and more people kind of posting their own content. So if it used to be in the realm of Instagram, that now is showing up in WhatsApp. Can you talk a bit about the utility of status updates, the considerations there, and how that might pertain to younger audiences?
Yeah, I think, you know, with youth engagement in particular, often try to approach activities that are like more creative and kind of user gen content focused. And so I think with the status update, it's easy to kind of build an action. And, you know, our hope is, you know, if we have kind of the web platform, we can provide instruction around, you know, share your story or like why you think XYZ, and then they, you know, with their status update, they can connect with everybody that they're connected with. Obviously, it has limitations in terms of like direct mobilization. So I think it just depends on how kind of soft or hard we're trying to go in terms of advocacy. But I think that you know, certainly youth are using these, and I think can be effective in kind of thinking about mobilization and sharing stories with their groups. Again, I think it's hard. Kind of the measurement of success is the biggest thing for me, and so that's why we kind of pivoted to a model where we're more focused on relationship development over time, so we can see kind of what they're doing and how they're growing, versus you know, being able to say, you know, we got 400,000 impressions from our WhatsApp strategy, which is just a little bit harder to to say. I see in the question and answer, and not to be too specific to India, but everybody that's working in India is aware of the you know, the tensions around youth organizing and social media in the country. And so, you know, as we move forward, really, I think it's a question of how kind of organic versus structured we want kind of our movement to look like, and really being careful. Sometimes, you know, doing an engaged, you know, influencer strategy where everyone's engaging with a decision maker, you know, might be helpful, and sometimes, you know, it's not. And so, you know, this is, you know, specifically the word toolkit around, you know, providing resources for a large number of people to take actions, which is really our model, is you know, on the bad list with the Indian government, given you know, how dissent has populated using kind of these messaging apps. So yes, it's certainly something that's on our radar, and I think it just highlights the need for understanding the local political context when we're talking about any of this organization. And certainly the India team, you know, we're working on this with influencers now. It's, you know, the reality on the ground today is not the same as it was 2 weeks ago, and we'll continue to look at that. And that's all I'll say about that for now, since I know we have, you know, a broad group on the phone.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. You've touched on this a few times, and we got another question about measurement, which measurement in communications is always tricky, you know, because social media broadly does not always reflect exactly, you know, the demographic of people that you are trying to reach. Impressions can look like huge numbers, but how much does that actually mean? I think there's been a really big pivot, especially in recent years, towards trying to get more substantive in what we measure across digital platforms to figure out what those meaningful metrics are. But when you're talking about a closed community, that can be a really hard thing. You know, so when you look at measurement, even though it's tricky, what might you look at with WhatsApp? Because I would imagine it's not just the number of people in the group, unless what you're going for is just to be able to say that you have a big number of people. What would the considerations be when you're thinking about trying to measure success?
Yeah, obviously engagement on the platform is one way to you know, to track you know, who is in your group and who, you know, but I think Bitly, or, you know, however you do URL tracking, is probably something that would become important for this. If we could create a unique URL for just a WhatsApp campaign, then we can track how many people are clicking on the URL if we're trying to drive them to take a specific action. Kind of the broader just getting people to, you know, share a little bit of information is hard in terms of you know, impressions, and so that's why we haven't necessarily pivoted towards using it a lot for kind of broad information sharing, and are really kind of more focused on specific communities, I guess. And so if we could, you know, track you know, how many engaged influencers we have, and then, you know, think about it from there, I think that there are ways to do it. But agreed, I don't think that mass mobilization, we're really going to have the same data analysis. And so I think not necessarily using this in the same way as others is going to be the most effective. Although I will say, you know, if we're in a place where it's difficult to, you know, use a Facebook, you know, maybe it would be more attractive.
Yeah, I think all of that is exactly right, Luke. And you know, if you or your organization is in a position where perhaps you're explaining to someone else the value of messaging apps, and also just the community that you have, just really relying on who is within that community and the degree to which they are connected with you. You know, that's really the most important part of these messaging apps. When you're looking kind of broadly at how to measure their success and utility, et cetera. So I do want to raise, we had a couple great points raised by Julia Mupas in the Philippines. She is with an organization called Ideals that does a lot of great communications work. Julia is saying that, you know, these messaging communities you've been talking about, for instance, on WhatsApp and Messenger, they don't really exist in the same way in the Philippines. You can look to Viber or Telegram as platforms that are there, but even on those platforms, they reach a much younger audience, and that's not necessarily who they're trying to message to. So there's a gap there. And then, you know, in addition, there are a number of privacy issues, and also when they're trying to do sort of a cost benefit analysis of how they would use these platforms, they're just having a hard time coming up with a good rationale to really lean into that. So she's wondering that, you know, with this background, if there are platforms that we would recommend. And I would just add to this question, because I think we only have time for one more question I had, which is how you prioritize messaging apps among all of the other platforms that we have, you know, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, making sure the website is updated, blogging, etc. Where do messaging apps fit in? How do you make that determination? And are there any, do you have any recommendations specific to Philippines?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's totally fine if, you know, we're looking at priorities and there isn't a strong use case in a certain, you know, scenario. I think that's a totally valid position. I will say in the Philippines, I had, you know, thought that, you know, since we're in the implementation phase, and Facebook is, you know, you have a strong engaged audience. If, you know, I know that there are some ways to kind of use Facebook Messenger to automate question responses, and thinking about it less as a mobilization tool and more as you know, an opportunity to answer questions. That could be a use case, but again, you know, if there are, I think it's identifying gaps, and if there are gaps in the strategy that this can help fill, I think it's great. But I'm certainly not pushing this as everybody needs to start doing this tomorrow. But I know the reality is that, you know, we're using them in different ways already, and so yeah. And sorry, the second question was
just more broadly, how would you recommend organizations go about prioritizing whether they use messaging apps and to what extent they use messaging apps in their strategies?
Yeah, I think that I would less think about prioritizing networks and more think about prioritizing kind of use cases and strategies. And if we're thinking about specific strategies, kind of matching the tactical arm of, you know, channels to the strategies. So if we're, you know, really focused on influencer engagement, you know, I think that we, you know, are seeing that in Mexico. There's kind of a norm around WhatsApp usage and everything, and so that's a way that we're leveraging it. But it wasn't, you know, we are thinking about messenger groups, and so, you know, we're putting them, you know, it's more we have this kind of use case, and it fits into the strategy, and so we're going to use it for X, Y, and Z. I will say, you know, without the paid component and without the measurement component, I think we would be hard pressed to kind of replace some of the other activities that we use just in terms of reach and ability to target and show results. And so I think I think it's hard, but I would more think about prioritization of strategies and then thinking about how the tools fit the strategy than kind of the other way around.
That makes great sense. We are at the end of our hour together. We do have another question that has to do with misinformation and risks. I want to take just 30 seconds to say that we will be writing a blog for the GHAI website based on this presentation. So we will go through all these questions, we will answer them, and feel free to follow up with us. I'm sorry that we are running out of time. Luke, if you could just move to the next slide really quick. We do these webinars once a month for the road safety program. If you are interested in pitching us a topic related to communications or highlighting your work, we would love to hear from you. So please do get in touch, roadsafetymedia@advocacyincubator.org, and we will work with you to bring you on to highlight everything that's going on. Again, if you have not RSVP'd to this, if you joined by direct link, please RSVP so we can send you the recording afterwards. And I will leave it there. Thank you to Luke, and thank you so much to everyone who joined us for this hour today. I hope it was useful, and we look forward to connecting with you very soon.